Well, good evening. This is Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome back to the Jacob Hornberger Show. Nice to be back with y'all. I want to talk to you tonight about the CIA, and CIA's in the news, and a little bit about Rick Perry's campaign, socialism, the New Deal, Social Security, and things like that. So we're going to be talking about the warfare state and, of course, the welfare state. Last week, I wrote a blog, last Friday to be exact, about the CIA, and specifically about the article that Nicholas Kristof, the New York Times columnist, have published in the New York Times. This is a classic example of how the mainstream press operates. It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, if we didn't have the internet, imagine with these people, the mainstream press, screening what people, are going to be permitted to read. I mean, this is the kind of stuff people were getting before the internet, the fluff. Christoph writes this glowing paean to the U.S. government about how it's liberated the people of Cuba. God, is that a Freudian slip? Liberate the people of Libya, and that, well, let's not be looking at the negative parts because this is a time where our country, thank you America was the title of his article, this is a time when our country can come together and celebrate this grand humanitarian achievement. What planet do these people live on? I mean, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, how do they reconcile reality with this la la land they're living in? I mean, it's almost like we're living in two alternative universes. One universe you see on the internet, and the other universe you see in the mainstream press, and they're completely different. And as I noted in my blog post on Friday, I said, look, compare this glowing, our government is so fantastic, it's selfless, it cares for people, it's over there liberating the people of Libya, isn't this a wonderful thing, with two pieces, one by Joanne Mariner, the Human Rights Watch attorney, or former Human Rights Watch attorney, she now works for a university, and the liberal commentator on Salon, Glenn Greenwald. I mean, here is Mariner, in the exact same time period that Christoph's writing his piece last week, writing about how the CIA, in I think it was around 2003, 2004, renditioned people to, yes, Gaddafi, yes, for the purpose of torture. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. Our government, yes, the same government that Christoph's over there, singing praises to, our government is so good, it cares for people, it loves people, it just, had performed this selfless act to bring liberty to the Libyan people. That was the same government that was over there helping the Gaddafi to oppress his people and, by the way, utilizing his brutality, his torture machinery, to torture people so that the CIA could say, we don't torture anybody. We're good. We're a good government. We don't do these things. We just attack dictators and liberate people. I mean, this was a partnership between our government. You see, you sometimes think that these mainstream pundits look at the CIA as something different, something apart. It's just like over there. But here's our government, and the CIA is over there. And we don't want to talk anything about what's going on with the CIA and stuff because, it's secret and it's national security and it's gosh, we don't want to jeopardize what's going on in these secret operations and they're keeping us safe and everything. So it's all over there, and this is our government over here. Well, that's not the way reality is. The CIA is the federal government. They're one and the same. When the CIA does things, the federal government is doing these things. It was the U.S. government that entered into that partnership with Gaddafi. It was the U.S. government that got Gaddafi to torture people on behalf of the U.S. government. And to read the accounts of some of these people got tortured, I mean, you can imagine. This is one of the most brutal dictators in the world. No one denies that. I mean, that's the rationale why Obama, ostensibly has intervened in Libya, right? Because he's a brutal dictator that massacres people, et cetera, et cetera. They were employing the same government. The U.S. government was employing the services, the talents, the abilities, the machinery of this dictatorship. Do you see any of that in Christoph's piece? No. It's like it just doesn't exist. It's like this, simultaneous alternative universe that is over there that you can only read about on the internet. And the same thing with Glenn Greenwald. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Greenwald's work, but it's fantastic on civil liberties and foreign policy. He's one of the few liberals that has not sealed his lips with Obama reaching the presidency. You know how these liberals, they went after Bush on the Patriot Act and the civil liberties violations and the enemy combatant doctrine and stuff. But as soon as Obama came in, they sealed their lips, you see, because that's their man. They got to be loyal to their man. But that's not what Greenwald did. I mean, Greenwald has stayed consistent in terms of defending civil liberties, human rights, exposing what the Obama administration's been doing, which is really just a repetition of what George Bush has done. I mean, there's really no difference in principle between the Obama administration and the Bush administration. Okay, Obama is assassinating more people, but I'm talking about principle. That there's no difference in principle with the war on terror, the occupations, the invasions, the renditions, the whole concept of the national security state, the warfare state. There's no difference. And Greenwald's been consistent, and he pointed, he had a critical analysis of Christoph's piece. But you read it on the internet. I mean, I don't think it's a big surprise that these mainstream papers are losing so much money, losing so much circulation, because they're over here in this la-la land, where, it's just our government is over there caring for people and so forth. Now, let me tell you the really humorous upside of this. I mean, Christoph's own newspaper has put him in a box, because guess what happens today? On the front page of the New York Times, I got a really big kick out of this. I think y'all are going to get a kick out of this too if you didn't know about this article. It turns out that the Human Rights Watch attorneys, remember that's where Joanne Mariner used to work. Oh, by the way, both she and Greenwald spoke at our conferences that we had in 2007 and 2008 on civil liberties and foreign policy. And you can access their great speeches there on our website at fff.org. But in any event, the New York Times publishes this article today, and guess what happened? The Human Rights Watch attorneys in Libya reach secret Libyan files, Gaddafi files, before the CIA does. And guess what's in? I mean, there must have been a real race, because the CIA had to know that, and had to be concerned about these secret files. I mean, they're not dumb, but the Human Rights Watch people beat them to it, and they found the file that Gaddafi and his people were holding on the CIA, and in that file is a record of the close cooperation between Gaddafi and the CIA, which is really Gaddafi and the U.S. government, the ties were extensive. It turns out that they tortured more people than what we had initially thought. I think Mariner's article said 6 or something, and it turns out that there was 8 or more. And it's really, part of this thing's really humorous. Let me pull out the article. Now get this. I'm not making this up. You can look at the article yourself. Today's New York Times. Guess who was helping Gaddafi write his speeches? I kid you not. The CIA was helping Muammar Gaddafi, the dictator supreme, the guy that Christoph is saying, oh, wasn't it a wonderful thing we've knocked him out? They were helping him write his speeches. Now, what does Christoph say about this? What's he going to do about this? I mean, is he going to address it? Is he going to say, hey, that government that I just praised, it turns out that government was writing speeches for Gaddafi. And let me read you the speech. You're going to really love this. This is the one-page speech that the CIA wrote. I think this is an excerpt from it. This is a quote. At a time when the world is celebrating the birth of Jesus, and as a token of our contributions toward a world full of peace, security, stability, and compassion, the great Jamaharaya presents its honest call for a WMD-free zone in the Middle East. That's the CIA, the U.S. government, writing this speech for this dictator Muammar Gaddafi. That's their words that he was going to use in a speech. It's absolutely incredible. And that, you know, in the British intelligence service MI6, it also was involved in this thing. Now, we don't know the full extent of this because the CIA is not talking. Now, let me quote you what the CIA says. You know, they never comment on things like this, but I guess they felt they needed to on this one. This is really funny. A CIA spokeswoman, Jennifer Youngblood, declined to comment on Friday on the documents. Okay, she declines to comment, but she then proceeds to comment. She says, quote, "It can't come as a surprise that the Central Intelligence Agency works with foreign governments to help protect our country from terrorism and other deadly threats." Well, excuse me, Miss Youngblood, but I'm sure it would come as a surprise if you walked into any public school across this land, you know, the schools that are run by the government, and you did a survey of school kids in there that are taking civics classes and pledging allegiance every day, and you asked them, do you think your government spreads freedom and democracy around the world, or do you think your government cooperates and partners with torturous dictators, brutal torturous dictators who torture their own people and get them in these partnerships to torture people on behalf of the U.S. government? I have a feeling that about 99% of those kids would say, my government would never do the latter. They would only spread freedom and democracy. So I think it would come as a shock to many Americans. Now, it doesn't come as a shock to libertarians that the CIA is doing this or the U.S. government's doing this. We've known about it. I mean, this is one of the things that we've stressed there at the Future of Freedom Foundation. This partnership with dictatorships that's been going on that is part of the reason why there's so much anger and hatred toward the United States. You've got the partnership with Egypt. You know how when you had the big protests rising up in Egypt and the U.S. government says, oh, we're behind the protesters, we're behind the protesters. You know, they get behind that they sort of, the parade starts going and they get out in front and say, we're leading the parade, you know. Well, turns out that there was a torture partnership with the Mubarak regime. They were, you know, sending billions of dollars of money in there to fund this military dictatorship they had for decades. That's what U.S. foreign aid is all about. It's propping up these dictators that oppress their own people. And it's a brutal dictatorship. And so they sent people there to torture them. What about Syria? You know how Obama's over there saying, hey, we got to get rid of the dictator in Syria. They entered into a partnership with Assad, the Syrian dictatorship, to torture this guy that the CIA kidnapped at Dulles International Airport. The guy was returning to Canada. All he was doing was switching planes. They kidnapped him here on American soil. They fly him all the way to Syria, and they make a deal there to torture him for a year. His name was Maher Ahar, and guess what? It turns out that he wasn't even a terrorist. He was totally innocent. The Canadian government that participated in this scheme ended up paying the guy a bunch of money. I forget how much, but it was a large sum of money in settlement. And this is all happening under the auspices of the U.S. government, with the support of the U.S. government. And one of the things that's always bothered me in this thing is the silence of the mainstream press. Because nobody in the mainstream press has ever said, wait a minute, how did this deal get cut with Syria? We all know that Syria is a brutal dictatorship. Bush used to say, we don't talk to Syria. We don't talk to Syria. You know, George W. Bush. And yet somebody was talking to Syria in the U.S. government because they had to negotiate the deal to torture Ahrar. They had to arrive at terms. Maybe it was in writing. Who signed off on the deal? Who negotiated the terms? We don't know any of this. Congress certainly has never said, we want an investigation. We want to subpoena people from the CIA. We want to know how this thing went down. Because all the CIA is going to do is say, the heck with you. We're not coming. This is national security, state secrets. We're protecting America. We don't have to answer to Congress. And so you never see Congress jacking with the CIA. This time, is Christoph going to come and say, use his column in the New York Times and say, look, I just read this article, Saturday in the New York Times. This is the same government that I was praising just last week. I am now calling for an investigation as to how this whole rendition system worked with Libya. I'm shocked. I don't think he's going to do it. Because you see, it's all part of this alternative universe that generally gets discussed and commented on the internet. Now, Christoph's in an interesting position because his own newspaper has now confronted him with reality on the front page of the newspaper. I mean, as a result of finding those secret files. Well, what's the mainstream press do about this? I mean, how do they avoid this? Well, my hunch is they're going to avoid it. You're not going to see the op-eds. You're not going to see the commentaries. You're not going to see any calls for investigation into CIA renditions and torture agreements and partnerships with these brutal dictatorships. All you're going to see is, our government is so good. It cares for people so much. The only reason it went into Libya was to care for people because they were going to get massacred by Gaddafi. That's what you're going to see. Now, when they're singing these praises of this intervention, I mean, how many times have we seen this? We can go all the way back to Iran, 1953, where they had a regime change operation there where the CIA went in. Well, I mean, let's back up a minute. Let's not forget that, first of all, it's illegal to the hilt. I mean, what Obama's done is absolutely illegal under our form of government. Before he can wage war, I don't care if it's a regime change or to save civilians or just because he wants to get his own man in public office there in a country that's got a lot of oil. Doesn't matter. The Constitution's clear. You cannot wage war without the constitutionally required congressional declaration of war. He never got that. That's an illegal enterprise. And so these mainstream commentators who say, oh, but it's so wonderful what he did, they never confront that what he did was illegal under our form of government. Now, we all know that nobody pays attention to the Constitution with respect to that constitutional restraint. We know that, right? Well, that goes back to this notion that I've talked about in previous shows, I've written about in my articles, that in foreign affairs, the U.S. president is a dictator. I mean, okay, you say, oh, Jacob, how can it be a dictator? This is the United States. Well, what is a dictator? A dictator is a person that's got omnipotent powers. That is, there are no constraints on his powers. I mean, that's why Gaddafi's called a dictator. Now, you can have benevolent dictators, people that are kind to their people, and then you can have brutal dictators, people that are, putting people in jail without, a warrant, just indefinite detention, torture. Those are the brutal dictators like Gaddafi or Mubarak and so forth. Well, those are the powers that the President of the United States now has. He has omnipotent powers in foreign affairs. Americans don't like to confront that. We like to think in terms of dictators belong in other lands, not here. But as a result of the President now wielding the power, any power that he wants to exercise in foreign affairs, there's no one that can reasonably deny that we have a dictatorship in international affairs. The president can kidnap any person he wants. Now, he doesn't do it personally, but neither did Gaddafi. He's got his CIA, he's got his military, and he can order them anywhere in the world to kidnap people. Put them away, lock them away in Gitmo or some secret prison anywhere, Afghanistan. Just ship them there. Or send them to a dictatorial regime. What's to stop him? Now, the person can come over here and sue, and guess what's going to happen? The courts throw him out immediately. Like when AR sued. All the CIA did is walk into court, say, state secrets doctrine, Your Honor, national security. The federal judge says dismissed. The Court of Appeals dismissed. They won't even let him present evidence because they say, oh, well, the national security is at stake, state secrets and so forth. So the president is immune. Now, granted, the CIA can still be prosecuted, and officials can be prosecuted. George W. Bush, I mean, he can't travel across the world freely because of fear that he's going to get arrested and prosecuted for what he did during his regime. Now, he's not going to get prosecuted here. Obama already said it. But he's subject to being arrested and prosecuted by regimes that are extending jurisdiction, extraterritorially. And take the CIA agents that went into Italy. Do you remember that when they went into Italy and kidnapped a guy there, called him a terrorist, and put him on a plane and whisked him out of the country for torture? I think it was to Egypt that they sent him to torture. The officials in Italy prosecuted these CIA agents. Now, it was an absentia, but the CIA certainly didn't send their agents back and say, we're courageous guys. We're going to come in here and face the music, and we have a right to do this, and we're the U.S. government. No, because they understood that the Italian courts may not recognize the dictatorial powers of the U.S. president. And sure enough, they didn't. They convicted those guys of felonies. Every one of those CIA officials, I think maybe with the possible exception of one, I forget how many there were, it was like, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something. They got convicted of felonies. They are felons at this point. They can never go into to Italy, that's for sure. One guy had a retirement home there. I don't know what happened to that. And they've got to be cautious about traveling elsewhere. I don't know whether the warrants are out for them on Interpol. But you see here in the U.S., nothing happens to them. They're felons, but Congress doesn't investigate that. They don't investigate the arrest, the kidnapping, the rendition, the torture of that guy in Italy. They don't call for an investigation. They don't subpoena people. Why? Because the president has dictatorial powers in foreign affairs. He's a dictator. He can invade any country. Remember, he doesn't have to comply with the declaration of war requirement anymore, because nothing's going to happen to him if he doesn't. Congress could impeach him, but they've already made clear they're not going to do that. Why? Because both parties love the power. They're hoping that a Republican gets in power next time, and then he becomes the dictator. He gets to invade and occupy countries like Bush did. And all the military largesse that goes with it, the military-industrial complex, the contracts, all the billions and billions of dollars that are given to, foreign regimes and rebels and all this stuff, our taxpayer money. That's big power. That's big money. So you're not going to see Republicans, calling for impeaching Obama for violating the Constitution, because they like it when they're in power. So they can invade countries. They can do whatever they want, occupy countries, kidnap people, torture people, send people into torturous regimes. The courts aren't going to do anything. All they're going to say is, well, there's no standing if somebody sues, and if a victim of this stuff sues, like AR did, they're going to say, state secrets, national security, dismissed, and the judge is going to be shivering and shaking because that's the CIA. I mean, that's the thing that that's the effect the CIA has on the members of Congress, and the judiciary. All they got to do is say national security, Your Honor, state secrets, and man, the federal judges start quivering and quaking, bang their gavel down, case dismissed, and run back to their chambers. And of course, Congress is the same way. Nobody's going to jack with the CIA. I mean, you got an agency that's assassinating people, without any controls at all. I mean, imagine where we are today in this country. You got the U.S. government, which is the CIA. They're one and the same. In fact, the CIA and the military are really the core features of the U.S. government. That's the core. That's the basis, the foundation on which the government rests. And that's where the force is exercised. And the president's able to exercise his force without any constraints. And now, of course, ever since 9/11, we've got the president with the power to take Americans into custody. Now let me give you another article. I mean, this is kind of interesting too. It goes to show you about this presidential power. You've got New York Times, today's issue. More Chinese dissidents appear to disappear. Beijing wants to legalize security tactic. Well, it's about China, which we all know is a dictatorship. Okay, it's a brutal communist dictatorship. It's been in power, longer than the Democratic Republican monopoly here in this country. Oh well, maybe not. But in any event, you've got this forced disappearance where the government just has the power to go seize people and detain them, put them in jail, do whatever it wants to them, torture them and whatever, and it's all it's all part of what they say is national security. And there's a part in here I wanted to read to you about what the government said about national. Oh yeah, here it is. Suspects' family, they're talking about getting a new criminal code. I mean, it's a joke in China. Suspects' families would have to be told of people's disappearance within 24 hours, unless doing so would hinder the investigation of crimes involving national security or terrorism. Oh, the two magic words, right? National security and terrorism. Does that not sound familiar? I mean, this is the age-old tactic. National security, terrorism, WMDs, whatever, and then that just shuts down everything. That's how the U.S. government got transformed into a government that has the power to round up Americans. The same power that the Chinese regime has, the U.S. government now has after 9/11. The power to seize any American, disappear him, do whatever they need to do to him, as long as they doing it under the war on terrorism. That they say he's a terrorist. He's a terrorist. And they take him into custody. Okay, he can file a petition for writ of habeas corpus. Big deal. All they have to do is go into court and show a little modicum of evidence showing that he's a terrorist, and the courts are going to bend over backwards, say, we're at war. We're at war. And so this was the huge transformation in American society after 9/11, that the president didn't even go to Congress to get these powers, these extraordinary powers the dictatorial regimes have. Now, you may come back to me and say, well, Jacob, they're not rounding people up. They're not disappearing people. But that's not the distinguishing characteristic of a dictatorship. The distinguishing characteristic of a dictatorship is whether the power to disappear people exists. Remember I mentioned you can have benevolent dictators, and you can have cruel and brutal dictators? Well, so far, the U.S. government is, quote, a benevolent dictator as far as the American people are concerned. Now, it's not a benevolent dictatorship with respect to the people in Guantanamo and these other secret bases and the people they rendition to these dictatorial regimes. But here, they disappeared Jose Padilla. Okay, well, nobody has any sympathy for Padilla, right? He's a terrorist. Well, but when they did all this to him, he had never been convicted. He was an American citizen. They took him, they turned him over to the military, they isolated him, they just tried to destroy his mind, his mental faculties, through sensory deprivation, through extreme isolation. He's an American. And they got court rulings that said you can do this to any American. Okay? So what goes on in China, what I just read you today, that power now exists. You see, this is what a lot of Americans don't realize, is the extent of the dictatorship, the dictatorial powers that the president now wields. I mean, I find it interesting when conservatives say, over my cold, dead fingers, you'll take my gun. But then they say, but we support the war on terrorism power to come and take me, seize me, and my wife and my children, and to cart us away to a secret prison dungeon where they can torture me and do whatever they want, or send me to Libya or Gaddafi or Mubarak, Egypt, Syria, whatever, to be tortured. It's incredible. Now, okay, I mentioned Iran. See, people like Christoph is over here judging this great success, but we've been here before. We've seen it. They were judging the ouster of Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953 as a great success. The CIA celebrated success. I mean, imagine going into a country, ousting the prime minister of a country in a coup, and I mean, it's just amazing. Imagine if it turned out that Iran had assassinated Kennedy in a regime change operation. I mean, don't you think Americans would be upset about that? Well, the CIA considered a great success. They got their man, the Shah of Iran, into power, and they proceeded to train his secret intelligence force, domestic intelligence force, the SAVAK. that proceeds to brutalize and torture the Iranian people for 25 years. I mean, you couldn't dare even criticize the government. You were carted away as a terrorist, as a national security threat. I mean, this stuff spreads. And so the Iranian people suffered under the Shah. Now, Iran was considered our friend because, you see, it was like Gaddafi. He was doing things for us. He was our partner. He was our buddy. And so at that time, during that time, it was okay to love Iran. Well, the Iranian people finally revolted against this brutal dictatorship, and by this time they had learned what the CIA had done. And so, 1979, they take U.S. diplomats hostage, and well, now, so if you look at this, and now, of course, then they end up with this aberrant regime, a brutal dictatorial regime that is now, the new enemy of the United States. We're supposed to hate Iran now because that, the new official, one of the new official enemies, post fall of the Berlin Wall enemies, that we're supposed to all be scared of, and but notice if you put this thing in a long continuum. Then you ask yourself, well, how successful was that regime change operation in '53 after all? Okay, yeah, it was successful in terms of ousting their democratically elected ruler, but notice the rupture that takes place over a long period of time. We're now dealing with a regime that's an official enemy that wants to get nuclear weapons because it's concerned that the U.S. is going to attack it and affect a regime change operation there like it's done in Libya and Iraq and so forth. I mean, you've got the Iranian people suffering under this dictatorship when they were very happy. They were moving toward democracy, developing it naturally with the democratically elected Mossadegh that the CIA ousted in favor of an unelected dictatorship. I mean, that's the thing, is that people like Christoph, the day after this junk, they say, oh, success, success. They don't look at it in terms of historically what the CIA has done and what the aftermath over the long run has been. Look at Guatemala. The CIA goes and ousts the democratically elected president of Guatemala. They call him a socialist, communist, even though his economic policies mirrored that of Franklin Roosevelt. And then they say, oh, that was a big success, and they celebrated his success. And it was really ingenious how they got this guy ousted from power. But there was this huge rupture in Guatemalan life. I mean, you had a civil war result which killed over 1 million Guatemalan people. It went on for 2 decades. And and then, of course, you've got this horrible situation where the CIA then uses Guatemalan officials to permit, well, I'm not sure whether the CIA was involved in this or not, but the U.S. government was involved with getting Guatemalan officials that they had helped install in this long chain of U.S.-supported dictators to do syphilis experiments, gonorrhea experiments on Guatemalan prisoners in their prisons. Criminal prisoners, not warlike prisoners, just criminal prisoners in jail. They injected them with syphilis and gonorrhea. The U.S. government did, to test penicillin to see how it worked. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. And so when you look at this continuum and you say, okay, you ousted Jacobo Arbenz, the democratically elected president of Guatemala, from power, but how successful was that when you look at it in this long continuum? And that's what people like Christoph don't do. They just say, oh, look at the short-term aspect of this. And what we've got to do as libertarians is look at the long-term aspect, and not to mention just the morality and the legality of supporting dictators, ousting dictators. I mean, there's another article in the paper today about Yemen, about how people in Yemen, it says protesters in Yemen vow to stay on the streets. Why is there no talk about ousting the Yemen dictator? I mean, he's no different from any of these other dictators. He's killing people there for protesting. Why? Because he's a U.S.-supported dictator. He's in the same position that Gaddafi was in, that Mubarak was in. I mean, sometimes the U.S., that Saddam Hussein was in. He was a partner of the U.S. government, too, during the 1980s. They support these dictators. People get angry at them. They supported the Shah and so forth, and people get angry at them. And then they sit there and say, why do people hate our country? Why do they hate our government? I mean, they play the innocent. And, what we libertarians have said is, you got to dismantle this military machine, this imperial regime. All it's doing is bad things in the world, notwithstanding this little la-la land that people like Christoph live in, that compartmentalize, that just block out of their minds all this nasty stuff the government's doing as part of its foreign imperialist pro-empire foreign policy, and just in la land of, oh, we're just here spreading freedom and democracy, looking for WMDs in Iraq, all that bogus nonsense. Now, I mentioned about how Jacobo Arbenz was really just a reflection of what of Franklin Roosevelt. I mean, what the guy was doing and nationalizing things and redistributing wealth, that was no different what Roosevelt did. And that's why I want to talk about, Rick Perry and some of the things he's raising and the New Deal and so forth. I mean, we've been taught in our public schools that Franklin Roosevelt saved free enterprise, that he brought in some necessary reforms and so forth. This is absolute nonsense. You don't save free enterprise by imposing and adopting a socialist fascist system. And that's effectively what Perry has written in his book. Now, the question is whether he's going to back off from it, and that's the purpose of this article by Michael Gerson in the Washington Post. I think it's today's issue, where he says, I wonder what Perry's going to do now, because Perry's saying the things that libertarians have been saying for years. We're not in this la land where, Franklin Roosevelt just adopted minor free enterprise reforms that saved the free enterprise system. No. He rejected the principles of economic liberty on which America had been founded, and he adopted the welfare state. Now, I've already talked about the warfare state, the national security state, but that came into existence, through and after World War II, as a way to supposedly to protect against the Soviet communist threat. The Soviets, who had been the partners of the U.S. empire during World War II. Well, and then and they'd even turned over Eastern Europe, to the Soviet communists. And that became the new official enemy. That was the enemy that lasted through all through the Cold War to justify the national security state, the warfare state, the Cold War national security state. But prior to that had been the welfare state. I mean, these are the two wholesale gigantic revolutions in American life. This is what Ronald Reagan. Okay, this is Gerson's article. Ronald Reagan, quote, said fascism was really the basis for the New Deal. Okay, now that's Reagan talking, but Perry essentially saying the same thing. He's talking about Social Security, which came into existence in Roosevelt's era as a Ponzi scheme that tells young workers a monstrous lie. It is a failure that, quote, we have been forced to accept for more than 70 years now. Now, why did Reagan call the New Deal a fascist system? Was because it was. It could have easily been adopted in fascist Italy. I mean, they were like mirror images of each other. You've got, for one thing, the National Industrial Recovery Act. Google it. Look it up. It was a scheme by which Roosevelt wanted to place American industries into cartels, just like they were doing in Italy, fascist Italy under Mussolini, where each industry would set its own prices, its own wages, and that these would be enacted into law, that everybody'd have to comply with that you would have to be part of the cartel, part of the syndicate. And he organized American industry on that basis, and he got Congress to enact this National Industrial Recovery Act. They had the National Recovery Administration. And then to pressure businessmen into joining it, a lot of businessmen were advocates of economic liberty. They said, we're not going to go with this fascist junk. I mean, fascism entails partly this government business partnership idea. And this is what Roosevelt was proposing, an entire system where you have government business partnerships, what liberals rightfully call crony capitalism, okay? Well, to bludgeon American businessmen into joining this thing, they had this thing called the Blue Eagle campaign. You can Google that too. And, they would propagandize in favor of the Blue Eagle, and businessmen were expected to put the Blue Eagle symbol in their storefront windows. And if you didn't display the Blue Eagle, you got visited, by other businessmen saying, "Where's your patriotism?" And then you got ostracized, where people would say, "Don't go patronize that business. It's not a real patriot." This was, it's sort of like the domestic version of the Patriot Act. That you're not a patriot if you're not supporting this fascist junk. Well, there's a great book out called Three New Deals that compares what Nazi Germany was doing and Mussolini's fascist Italy was doing with Roosevelt's New Deal, and you'd be amazed at the similarities. If you don't want to buy the book or you want to see what it's about beforehand, look at some of the reviews on Amazon. But go to Reason Site or just Google Three New Deals by David Bose, and Bose from the Cato Institute writes an excellent review of the book where he shows the similarities between these systems. In fact, it might surprise you to know that Hitler, who he is, he wrote a letter to Roosevelt commending him on his economic policies, and it says, "We're doing the same thing here in Germany, and I want to commend you on the way you handle these bureaucracies and oppositions. You just steamroll, you just go right over them, and you get your policies in effect, and you're to be commended for this." That was Hitler commending Roosevelt on his fascist policies. Well, it was a combination of the New Deal was a combination of fascism and socialism, the socialism of the welfare state, taking money from one person and giving it to another person. And don't forget, Roosevelt was the guy that nationalized gold. That's what they were complaining about with Arbenz, that Arbenz in Guatemala was nationalizing real estate and giving it to the poor. Well, it's no different in principle from the welfare state, which takes money from people to whom it rightfully belongs and gives it to others. And that was what Social Security was based on. Taking money from the young and giving it to the senior citizens. There never was a trust fund. They took very much care to make sure that this was never to be construed as a trust fund or a retirement account. They wrote the law very carefully to say you've got a tax. It would have been no different if the Social Security monies had been funded by the income tax. But they were clever. They constructed it as a Social Security tax to create the appearance among people, in their minds that, oh gosh, my money's going from here, Social Security tax, into a trust fund. But they created the law very carefully to make sure that the Supreme Court would never construe it that way. That this is just a tax, like an income tax or whatever, and this is just a welfare program. And that's exactly what the Supreme Court did. So when people say, "Gosh, I thought it was, I was putting my money in. Oh, there's a trust fund. There's a lockbox there," and it's all self-deception. It's all self-delusion, because all they had to do is go see what the Supreme Court had ruled. All they had to do is read the law and realize that this is just a welfare program, like any other welfare program: food stamps, Medicare, education grants, farm subsidies, foreign aid to dictatorships. It's just a welfare program, and that nobody had any vested rights in the continuation of this thing. So here you got Perry bringing these things up, which is things that Goldwater brought up, that Reagan brought up, and so it's very surprising that to see a conservative bringing these things up. Now, we're not surprised that Ron Paul discusses these things, being a libertarian, but it is interesting to see a conservative talking like this, because conservatives used to talk like this back, in the 30s and 40s, because they understood back then, that this New Deal, this welfare state, was a fascist socialist system. But over time, conservatives just threw in the towel. They just threw in the towel and said, "Oh, well, if we're going to be elected, if we're going to have power, we've got to just accept that the fact that the New Deal, the Great Society, the welfare state is here." And then when the warfare state got adopted, that the welfare warfare state is here. And conservatives simply just decide to take the position, let's call it freedom and free enterprise. Let's throw in the towel. Let's let our kids be taught that it's freedom and free enterprise. So you have entire generations, 2 or 3 generations, that have been indoctrinated in the public schools with the notion that the welfare warfare state is freedom, that Social Security is freedom, that the New Deal saved free enterprise, that we've got a free enterprise system in America, and that all of this warfare state, the 700 or 100, 800 bases around the world is freedom, that they're defending our freedoms, that the troops are occupying for freedom. Everything is about freedom, you see. And the idea is that if you indoctrinate the children young enough, you start them when they're 6 years old, by the time they're 18, oh yeah, they may be screwed up a little bit. You know, they may have to be put on Ritalin or Adderall, or they're out tripping out on, dope, to such an extent you got to continue waging this war on drugs. But at least they'll believe that this is a free society, and to a large extent it's worked. I mean, yeah, people are screwed up, to such an extent that you've got to keep waging this war on drugs because there's so much consumption of drugs. But at least they believe they're free. Thank God I'm an American, because at least I know I'm free, and the troops are abroad defending my freedoms. And golly, Jacob, you wouldn't be able to say the things you say if it weren't for the troops that are occupying these foreign countries. And so, I mean, they honestly believe this. This is the success story of government schooling. But all of a sudden, you've got a guy like Perry that's saying things that are they're shocking, because people haven't heard that in decades, not from the conservatives. And he's shaking things up with these statements. Now, he said them in his book, and I don't know whether he's planning on running now. And so the speculation is, what's going to happen now? What does he do now? I mean, he's called Social Security a Ponzi scheme, a monstrous lie, a failure that we've had to accept for 70 years. What does he do now? When they ask him in these debates, Governor Perry, what do you want to do about Social Security? My hunch is he's going to back off. This is what conservatives have done for decades. They start running away from the rhetoric. When the rubber meets the road, they can't do the right thing. The right thing is what we libertarians have said: when you've got a monstrous lie, when you've got a Ponzi scheme, when you've got a fraudulent system, and that's all that it's all true about Social Security. It's the biggest anti-family value program that's ever been adopted. It tears families apart. I mean, it should be children that have this responsibility for parents that are in need, that can't help it, and so forth. And if children won't act, then it's for the church, or Amelie Osner groups, charitable groups, neighbors, friends, countrymen, and so forth. But it's not the role of government. This is what libertarians have been arguing. This is not a legitimate role of government. And libertarians have no problem calling for repeal. I mean, I call for immediate repeal of Social Security, because if something's fraudulent, if it's immoral, if it's wrong, then how can you, as a Christian or anybody else, call for the continuation of this program? I mean, if an embezzler got caught embezzling and said, well, I'm dependent on the money, I've been doing it for decades, and I'm dependent on it, would we say, oh, it would be cruel to cut off the embezzlement? We've got to gradually reduce it, because it's just cruel. He's dependent on this money he's been taking for all these decades. We'd never say that, because it's morally wrong to steal, to take what doesn't belong to you. And so what does Perry do now? Well, my hunch, he's going to run for the hills, because that's what conservatives have always done to get votes. They think, well, how would I get votes if I tell the truth? So Perry's in this uncomfortable position of he's going to be calling for the continuation of a program that he himself knows is fraudulent. It's monstrous. It's a lie. Those are his words. And so Perry, who is a very devout Christian, is now put in the position as a Christian and as a politician of calling for the continuation, if this is what in fact he does, and I have no doubts he's going to do it, of a program that he himself knows is immoral, is monstrous, a lie, this fascist scheme, a Ponzi scheme. Ponzi, by the way, was an Italian guy, in case you hadn't figured that out. So, this is going to be an interesting time here, especially for us libertarians, because we're going to be able to argue all the things that conservatives used to argue in the 30s and 40s, that the New Deal was a fascist scheme, it was a socialist scheme, and that it should never have been enacted. I mean, this is the big debate we need to have in this country, is where do we go? Things are out of control as far as spending, debt. I mean, look, we just got through this debt ceiling debate, where they let the government borrow another almost $3 trillion. Do you see any of these people? They were arguing, oh, catastrophe and all this, that we need to raise this debt ceiling. Do you see any of them calling for the drastic reduction in government spending? I mean, okay, they've got this leeway now, 2 more years. Do you see them saying, hey guys, we've got a debt ceiling coming up again. We got by this time, but 2 years from now, we've got this ceiling that's coming up where the government can't borrow on top of that ceiling. Do you see them calling for slashing of government spending? No. Remember what I told you when they raised that debt ceiling, that happy days are here again? That as soon as they got it, they were crying, oh, the world will fall in if we don't raise the debt ceiling. We've got to do it. The Congress are being irresponsible and so forth. Do you see any of them saying, now is the time to slash spending because we've got a ceiling coming up in 2 years from now? Not in your wildest dreams. All they're doing is calling for more government spending. Their favorite government programs. You got Maureen Dowd, New York Times liberal columnist. One of her pet programs apparently is FEMA. So she's taking libertarians like Ron Paul to task for calling for abolishing FEMA. Oh, well, how would we survive in hurricanes without FEMA? Oh, gosh, people would never have been able to do it without FEMA. And so we've got to keep FEMA in existence. Well, you've got that same argument on every single government program, whether it's Social Security or Medicare or FEMA or Medicaid or foreign aid to dictators. Do you see anybody saying abolish foreign aid? Nobody's saying that. So, in other words, we're going to see this same thing 2 years from now. Oh my gosh, it would be catastrophic if we didn't let the government borrow more and more and more and more. And that's where we are now with this welfare state that Roosevelt brought into existence, expanded by Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon and all the rest of the Republican Democratic gang. And you've got the warfare state. I mean, look at Eugene Robinson in the Washington Post today. He's talking about how George W. Bush and Dick Cheney sent us into this stratosphere with out-of-control spending. He said if it hadn't been for them and these wars, everything would be hunky-dory. Well, everything would not be hunky-dory. We'd be better off without what they did, the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan and so forth, and the borrowing of money from the Chinese communists, where they're now the principal foreign debtor of the creditor of the United States. But things wouldn't be hunky-dory. They'd be better off. But you see, notice that the liberals like Robinson focus on the warfare state because everything's okay with respect to Franklin Roosevelt's welfare state. Well, everything isn't okay with Franklin Roosevelt's welfare state. If you go over like to Europe, in Greece, in Spain, in Italy, where they just have Franklin Roosevelt's welfare state, because the welfare state originated from the same place, the German socialists. That's where Roosevelt got the idea. That's where the Greeks got the idea. That's where Europe got the idea of the welfare state, from German socialists. That's why Otto von Bismarck, his bust is on the Social Security's website here in the United States. It's not Jefferson or Washington. And so, they're going bust. They're going broke over there because of the welfare state. And we're going bust over here because of not just the warfare state, Eugene Robinson, but the combination of the welfare warfare state. I mean, they're taking us down, these statists. And that's the debate we need to have in this country. And I'm really hoping that people like Perry, I'd like to think he wouldn't back off, but I have no pretensions. The guy's going to back off. He's not going to say, let's get rid of the New Deal junk. Let's get rid of the Medicare. Let's get rid of the Medicaid. Let's get rid of Social Security. He's never going to say dismantle the warfare state. That's one of the things that Republicans are known for, supporting the invasions and occupations. That's where they're really kind of boxed in with Obama, because Obama has embraced their policies. Obama could become a Republican very easily. And Republicans would immediately support him. Of course, the Democrats would then go, oppose him. But in terms of philosophy on the foreign policy and civil liberties, he's doing the only thing Republicans are mad about Libya is that it was Obama that did it instead of their man doing it. Because Bush did it in Iraq. And remember when Bush says, oh, we're here after we didn't find the WMDs, that was bogus from the beginning, but we're here to help the Iraqi people. Republicans loved it. Oh, this is what compassionate conservatism is all about. and they're just angry that now Obama's doing it instead of their man. They can't attack him. How are they going to attack him when they didn't attack their man for doing the exact same thing that in Iraq that he did with Libya? But these people are taking us down. And I'm hoping that maybe Perry gets challenged by the mainstream press, because in the process of challenging him, they've got to bring to the attention of the American people, all these public school graduates, that there were people calling the New Deal fascist and socialist, and that's what these programs are. Because at least then if people start realizing that, light bulbs might start going off. I mean, you can see how much the libertarian movement has grown. I mean, look at the number of people that are supporting Ron Paul. It's incredible. And even people that don't get involved in politics, you can just see it. We see it at the Future of Freedom Foundation. There's a renewed interest. You got Judge Napolitano and John Stossel here. Imagine on national television. I mean, I get to appear on Napolitano's show. I've never been on Stossel's show, but I get to appear on Napolitano's show. I mean, these are exciting times for libertarians, because despite the fact that you've got all this welfare warfareism, you can tell that there's a segment in American society that are waking up. They're breaking through, and they're saying, wow, yeah, the libertarians are right. They've been right. We're right about the drug war. We're right about the welfare state. That's what Perry's alluding to when he talks about fascism and socialism of the welfare state. We're right about the warfare state. I mean, this is where all the blowbacks come in, the excuses for the terrorism that they use then to take away our freedoms. And so this is exciting for us libertarians, because people are now starting to debate our paradigm. You can see the attacks. The left is starting to attack libertarians. The right is attacking libertarians. As I've said before, this is the battle facing our country. It's not liberals versus conservatives. I mean, that they both embrace the socialism, the fascism of the welfare state. They call it freedom. They both embrace the warfare state. They call it defending our rights and freedoms overseas. The real battle in this country is libertarianism versus statism. Okay? That's the real battle. And that's the battle that we've got to keep fighting as libertarians, and because we're making gigantic strides in terms of people's waking up and breaking through the way we libertarians have broken through the indoctrination and all the la-la land, the nonsense, the stuff that Christoph's writing about, oh, the government's liberating people, when in fact it's over there entering into these torture agreements and killing people and invading people and getting people angry and hateful toward the United States. So we're making some progress. We just got to keep hanging in there, that when these liberals go on the attack against us, for daring to call their system fascist and socialist, we come back and we talk about the virtues of economic liberty and limited government, free markets, the principles of free markets on which our country was founded, the principles of Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman. We keep, hammering down on the virtues and the morality of the free market way of life. And then a limited government republic. We talk about the virtues of that, where the founding fathers did not intend for America to have an enormous standing army and a military-industrial complex and a CIA and intelligence force that goes abroad in search of monsters to destroy, because, as John Quincy Adams says, it converts America into the dictatress of the world. It changes us. It changes our national character. That we've got to keep hammering about the virtues of the private sector. Liberate the American people to travel and trade with the people of the world, with Iranians, with Cubans, with North Koreans. Let the American private sector be the ambassadors of the world, and instead of isolating them like the statists are doing. And then rein in the government, dismantle the empire, bring all the troops home from everywhere, discharge them into the private sector. And as Perry suggests, abolish the income tax. Leave people free to keep their own money. Replace it with nothing. Dismantle the whole welfare warfare state. Liberate the American people. That's the show. It's great to be back with you again. Sorry I missed you last week, and I'll see you next week. And come and visit us at the Future of Freedom Foundation, fff.org. Subscribe to our free email update. We like to think it's the best, if not the best, one of the best daily libertarian editorial commentary pages on the internet. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.